We're going to be up here talking about virtualized hardware and the move to cloud. We got a really nice mix of speakers up here. Some people from the facilities and service providers areas, some manufacturers, all over the map. But everybody has one thing in common. They're all working in the cloud in some capacity. So we are going to chat about what's working, what's not working, and yes, we will be talking some economics and cost, that these types of things that have come up so much throughout the day, and I think have some fun with it for sure. So briefly, I'm going to ask each of you to just introduce yourself. Let's not take too much time on these, but Mike Kronk, one of the architects of 2110, and a good friend of SVG, start us out.
Thanks, Mike. Architect 2110, and I'm VP of Strategy now for TVU Networks. Before that, with Grass Valley, led the AMP development team. Spent a couple years with AWS as head of product for AWS Media Services, and was going to retire, but I got to see what TVU was doing and got excited and went to that. Got a really fast case study. Great. So France TV, 68 days of production delivered to the people of France, that the torch relay, the traditional OB budget, there's like no way we can do this, came to TVU. 7 cameras, all doing wireless, private 5G, Starlink combination, roaming studio, never a dropout across 68 days, into something called TVU Producer, which is a switcher, all the way through to playout, all in the cloud in the France region of AWS, delivered to set-top boxes through Orange TV to the country, and also over the top. 92% less cost than they would have done with a traditional OB. They got 50 million views, 32 million uniques, and 3 times higher engagement than the French Open. So smashing success, and an example of how you can use cloud production.
Awesome. Man, that was fast, Mike. I was such a jerk saying you had to run through those slides, and you did such a perfect job. Excellent. All right, cool. Mark Davis from TAG, give us a little bit about what you guys do and how you guys play into this cloud ecosystem.
Yeah, Mark Davis from TAG. I'm the second bald guy from the left, if everyone wants to know that.
Hard to decipher in this room.
Yeah, for some reason when they put us together, it's a weird thing. But yeah, I've been at TAG for going on 4 years now. I used to head up customer success for them, but now we're on the sales side. Have nearly 25 years of experience in the industry. Where from a TAG perspective, we've been IP only from the beginning. So I think that we've been trying and successfully been on the head of the curve on where cloud has to be and how to deploy it and doing it the right way. And we could talk about that more on the panel here in a minute.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Change in your print program, EWR strikes again. Alex from Grass Valley is joining us in place of Jeremy Morrell. Alex, obviously with AMP, Grass was an early entrant into the cloud sweepstakes. What's going on with you guys these days?
Thanks. So, I'm not quite as good looking as Jeremy, so there we go. So everybody's, I think, heard of AMP. What everybody thinks of AMP is that it's a cloud-based solution. It isn't. It's software-defined. You can put that on any compute wherever you want. And so our customers are actually making choices either at the beginning of a project or even on a day-to-day basis as to whether they're deploying it on-prem or in the cloud, and some combination of the two. This has been going on for years. And it was interesting watching it because I was outside of Grass Valley for a few years, where I was at Avid and then Telestream, and watching it from the outside, obviously there was something there, but I could tell that it wasn't quite ready, and I think a lot of people were running around at Grass Valley saying, it does this and it does that, and what they should have been saying, what we should have been saying is, it will do this and it will do that, because today, in 2025, it does everything that we hoped it would do. It's having a fantastic moment in the sun. Interestingly, and I just said this to Claudia earlier, interestingly, Playout, which is just random, but Playout is having a moment in the sun and it's going incredibly well. So having come back to Grass Valley, leading the US North American team, it's been great fun to talk to many of the large broadcasters and large media companies who are already using it for tier one sport, tier one broadcasts, and we might talk a little bit about that as we go forward.
Great, thanks, Alex. And these are 3 technology providers. Let's talk about some users and folks that deploy this technology. James, a little bit about what Game Creek is doing in addition to what we heard from Jason Taubman, your colleague, earlier today in the cloud.
Absolutely, and thank you, Jason. I'm James Ciccarello with Game Creek Video. I oversee our GCV Anywhere product line, so that is all of our remote access production facilities, all of the remote connectivity that we do from our mobile units down to various client sites, and that also puts me in the ballpark of managing all of our cloud and remote access broadcast additions. So we've started out strong with a product with remote graphics, so we're doing today a very large quantity of expression graphics in the cloud down for our clients at NBC Sports through the RSNs. And we were able to very cleanly lift and shift that workflow from a truck-centric workflow down into a cloud-centric workflow and continue to have consistent, high-quality touch experiences for our users. And now we're looking out at the industry and finding new ways to continue to develop solutions and finding new ways to do that wherever the cloud may present itself, whether it's public, hybrid, on-prem, et cetera.
Very cool. Yeah. Check out on sportsvideo.org. We got a great story about the cloud-based graphics workload that the NBC RSNs are doing, and it's just all kinds of cool stuff. Scott Rothenberg, good friend of SVG and a leader at NEP. You guys are all over the cloud spectrum right now. What's some high-level highlights?
So I'm Scott Rothenberg, SVP of Technology and Capital Planning, chair of our Technology Steering Committee. We're using cloud as a tool, public cloud, private cloud. We did the Paris Olympics in a virtualized environment for 4 Olympic venues for OBS. I think most people here read about it in SVG. We're using Playout in the cloud for Sunday Ticket. We do graphics, we do remote commentary, blending cloud workflows with connected production workflows with on-site workflows.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's start there. It's the same question I asked the previous panel because I'm curious, like, what's working in the cloud right now? Alex, you mentioned it, so I'll start with you. Playout seems to be, as you said, having a moment in the sun, and then I'm going to ask everybody to give me one thing that belongs in the cloud. One workload or workflow that belongs in the cloud. Alex, I assume Playout's going to be yours.
Well, I think you can do anything in the cloud if you want to, but I think where it's maybe not so appropriate would be where latency is something that is really important. So if you look at venues that have big scoreboards and big video screens, if there's latency, the crowd sees it, it's not a great environment. So I suspect that many venues will continue to do everything on-prem for game day presentation. But
sure.
Apart from that, I think anything else, right now we have people doing live production, we have people doing playout, we have people doing asset management, everything. So, yeah.
James, I mentioned graphics. Is that a good one for you? And anything that you think maybe needs a little work?
Yeah, so obviously as the guy doing cloud graphics, I'm going to say cloud graphics belongs in the cloud, right? But as is alluded to by the title of the panel, right, virtualized hardware, one of the really great things about the workflows we're building in the cloud is that it doesn't actually need to be in the cloud, right? That cloud can exist wherever you need it to exist. And we're starting to see more of that come on board, and we're starting to see a scenario today where we're having the ability with our vendors to do best-of-breed analysis between multiple vendors in things like instant replay servers or switchers or audio consoles, and you can start to see scenarios where you're getting software-defined solutions that can address whether you have the latency problem of needing to relocate that or whether you have the hardware and licensing problem, you have the ability to start moving more of that across. So I think there's going to inevitably always be things like cameras, microphones, cable, the things that are the reasons that truck companies are going to be around forever, right? You still need the acquisition layer. But how can we go about making sure that we have the software-defined network or the software-defined solutions so that the processing that is managing those signals to get a good quality production into the home happens at the level that it needs to happen at, and you've got resources on-site and off-site.
Sure. Scott, you mentioned a few right up top. Maybe dive in a little bit more in terms of what you see as a really, like a slam dunk for the cloud right now.
I mean, playouts is definitely in the slam dunk category. I mean, I think that it's scalable workflows. I mean, the virtualized environment is going to give you the ability to scale up, scale down. If you're going to do 300 events in Boston that are roughly 12 cameras, roughly the same spec, that's probably not going to be great for the cloud. But if you're going to need to go up and down frequently, or if your shows have different tools that it's going to need, those tools you can deploy in a virtualized environment. Mm-hmm. Again, whether that's public cloud, private cloud, I think we tend to mix those discussions probably more often than we should. So I think every time I say cloud, sorry, AWS, I don't necessarily mean AWS.
Sure, absolutely. Mike, on your end, maybe either a piece of the workflow that belongs in the cloud, or again, Scott kind of alluded to this idea that there are certain events and certain tiers of events that maybe belong with cloud-based systems and certain tiers that don't, for that matter.
Yeah, well, like the France TV torch relay example, that's a kind of a one-off event. You don't have capacity for that normally, so that's easy to kind of pop up for 68 days and bring down. Another great example, remote commentary. So your Spanish language announcer for the soccer game can be anywhere in the world. You send them a fee, you get it back as long as you can time that back, and it's a perfect way to do that. Much more cost effective than flying in a plane and paying for hotel and all that kind of stuff. I'm also with Alex though that really you can do just about anything. You can do anything in the cloud that you want. We do PCR workflows, contribution workflows, master control, play out, OTT streaming kinds of. You can do all of that there. It's just really, do the economics work? Is it the right thing for the job? And that varies.
Absolutely. Mark, how about on your end?
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo a little bit about what Mike was talking about. It's not necessarily one good thing that the cloud is a slam dunk for in my mind. It's really the unknown of the future of what this particular investment needs to be. Where if you have to burst into something and you don't know what it's going to be next or how long it's going to be up, or if there's a long time commitment from a client, that seems like a perfect fit for the cloud, because you invest in that moment in time what you know right now, and then you can destroy it and forget it and then move on. And it's the responsibility of the vendors to be able to keep up with that and to do it in a way where the cloud formations and the orchestration and the software-defined services and all of those things are as seamless as you can. And that's something that TAG has been trying to do along the way.
All right. Well, we have pinpointed some things that work and some things that don't. So I'm curious, and I'll throw it out whoever wants to grab this one first. But latency has been something that's been mentioned, that in terms of quality assurance might be a bit of a question mark. Redundancy is nice when you can have 18 redundant systems in the cloud, but in terms of individual deployments potentially failing, are virtualized systems ready to be relied on for mission critical broadcasts today? And by mission critical, I mean like somebody gets fired if something drops. You know what I mean? This is a real 100% must go to air event. Is virtualized hardware ready today, James?
I can answer that really easily. The whole reason we went to cloud graphics is because graphics servers fail when you ship them across the US, always, right? It's a ubiquitous experience. Anyone who's been on a truck and had a graphics server shipped in knows that in all likelihood, your engineer is going to spend 2.5 hours getting that graphics server back online. In the event, this has never happened, okay? We've been doing this for a year and this has never happened. In the event that one of my cloud graphics servers goes offline, 12 minutes from now, I have a brand new one ready to go production on air.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Instead of 2.5 hours worth of, oops, can I crunch this RAM? So when it comes to failure rates, we're not seeing the failure rates in the cloud that we see in the field by any means. And when it comes to even if the worst case scenario happens, I think your recovery rate is going to be incredibly faster than anything that you'd be able to do with on-prem hardware.
And it probably depends on where the event is. Again, if you're in a stadium with a lot of redundant fiber that's in a good, secure environment versus if you're in the middle of a cornfield in Iowa, for your fiber was just laid yesterday, those are two different scenarios that one's going to be more reliable than the other. So I think it's going to depend on what that is. But I don't think you could say emphatically there is no workflow, there's no scenario where it's not ready for prime time. I mean, we're all doing it. We're doing it on shows that everybody in this room watches all the time.
Sure.
So
It's really about how you architect it, because you can add, especially with software in the cloud, you can add amazing levels of redundancy such that if you have a failure, your recovery is faster, as you're saying. And so that's really the thing. And then you mentioned latency. So there's this thing called physics. We can't cheat it, right? So
Light, it moves.
I think, but even though there are techniques, and the gentleman, and we do this at TVU, the gentleman from MLB earlier today said, Japan to Chicago round trip time, like 0.9 seconds, I think it was. So you can get pretty close. Is that good enough for the return fee to the talent so they don't get disoriented? Depends, right? So there's things, and especially like the stadium jumbotron, for example. The audience is going to see that as you're bouncing up the cloud and back. And so there's just things there. You got to be aware of physics, but we can make it really, really short so that just about anything you could do in the cloud.
although I think there's a lot of different types of latency. Because you've got certainly that type of latency, but you've got tactile control devices that do have latency. And again, how does that jog wheel feel? Can you give it that smooth replay that the viewer's expecting? Again, depending on what distances you're traveling, the answer to that is no.
Well, there are techniques.
Yeah.
And
Like tally, things like this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
James.
I'll give the shout out to AWS on this, right? AWS's local zones helped conquer that type of problem, right? A frame is 16 milliseconds. I can be less than 16 milliseconds to any broadcast center in the US in an AWS local zone without really trying. So yeah, there is going to be latency there on the lift and shift to the cloud, but at least for me, that latency is not necessarily the time it takes to get from ground to cloud. More often than not, that latency is the time it takes to do the conversion to get from cloud to cloud to ground.
Sure. And I always like to joke that any director or producer, if you tell them that there's a potential for latency, they're going to see it. They're going to, even if they don't actually see it, right? They're going to say, I saw it. Yep, there you go. I saw the millisecond right there. Alex.
I think for broadcast, though, today, Tier 1 sports are being produced using software-defined solutions that are, not AMP, right, but there are others, but AMP specifically. Tier 1 sports today in the US, all over the world, they're doing basketball, they're doing baseball, they're doing these today. I mean, NEP did the NFL game on Christmas Day, right, that way, right? So that's a big event. So yes, that's ready. Where we're seeing a little bit of hesitancy is, so the control plane of AMP sits in the cloud, right? So we're seeing TV stations, local TV stations say, hey, I lose the internet once a day. And to fix that problem, they need us to move our control plane. They're fixing the wrong problem, but that shows that there is still a world in which actually internet connectivity is still a challenge. So we are seeing pushback in there, and we're having to rethink and re-architect how we're dealing with that.
Mark?
I'm going to go back to a comment that you just made in terms of latency, that even if you say the words, someone's going to see a problem. I think it's a challenge in the industry right now is that not everyone is defining the measurement of latency the same way. And it's in the perspective of what you know and what you've been taught along the time. So I think there's some work to understand where those standards need to be and what, making sure that we're speaking apples to apples on that, and where it's okay to be latent and where it's okay not to be latent.
Sure.
And some of this is an evolution. I mean, we went from baseband to individual monitors through multi-viewers, and that was latent. And that was a lot of concern at first of could the program monitor go through a multi-viewer, and now that's not a discussion that we have. Same thing with CRT monitors to LCD monitors to LED. I mean, these are things we've overcome as an industry, and it's just a learning curve a little bit of how you can still function in a new environment.
Sure. And we are on that. Where are we on that curve? I guess that's always my question. Are we right there, like at the peak, or James?
We're clearly not comfortable talking about in absolutes yet.
Sure.
Right? When you talk about where we are in latency, ask any vendor what is your actual glass-to-glass latency for this thing? And they're going to get real squirmy, right? Like, nobody really likes to look at somebody and say, yes, I can do this in X amount of time, right? There are a few places that you see that advertised, but it is not ubiquitous. So I think we're getting consistently better on it, and we're getting consistently better information, and all of our vendors are moving to a place where we're seeing latencies continue to decrease. But having real public discourse about, this vendor's latency is A, this vendor's latency is B, we're not talking about it yet. So I think we're getting better, but I don't think we're at the crest of the hill.
And I think the adoption curve is also that whereas there's not feature parity in things that are virtualized and things that are in hardware across the board.
Right.
Some things do have feature parity, some things do not. Again, you go to the Olympics, there was a lot of time with the crew spent training them on where there are limitations of what they could do in hardware and what they're going to do in a virtualized environment. And that took time. Again, very successful. I don't think ratings were great. By every measure, it was a wild success.
Right.
But it did take that training. So, and that's going to be a continuous curve.
Yeah, and a robust feature set with more latency latency, or the other way around. Yeah, there's going to be trade-offs. So, all right, let's get into it. Let's get into the economics conversation just a little bit. And again, this is an association and an event that's focused on technology, but we just can't have this conversation without talking about the economics of all this. So I'll throw it out to the group, whoever wants to jump out there, either from a vendor or a user perspective. But how does virtualization shift purchasing models, total cost of ownership, and the ROI for you? We can start with licenses. We can start wherever you guys want. But how is building systems with this cloud-based architecture changing the way that you think about your bottom line?
I'll start. I think most all of us that know a public broadcast, right? We're for profit, right? Every single one of us. And
the other ones aren't going to be around for very long, apparently.
So when you price something, you do have Thank you. I didn't hear what you said, but
let's let that one sink for a little bit. Come on.
It's just the world we're living in, folks.
There we go. Everyone missed that one.
I'm not sure what he said, but
It's probably a good thing.
when you price something, you need to be cognizant of your costs. A hyperscaler like an AWS or a GCP, it's on demand, or you can get a 1-year reservation. And so if a vendor is pricing on there, it's very hard to give a perpetual license. Just forever, just use that because you're going to go in the red pretty soon. If you're buying Dells on premise, and TV you can work either place, you've got that hardware cost. Now you can potentially do something that's longer term perpetual, but it's based on that model. And I think if we understand that, it's a good basis to have the conversation, because we all need to figure out how we collectively make money.
Yeah, I think it's more complex in the virtualized environment. There's more levers because, you've got, you say the Dell server. The Dell server has an SLA with it. It's got a shorter lifespan than bespoke hardware that we've got. You've got to figure out what those, things are. And some of that lifespan of a Dell server is an opinion. Because, if you're going to do the same thing for 10 years, the Dell server might function for 10 years. As an industry, we don't tend to do the same thing for 10 years. So therefore, we're going to ask more of the hardware, which there's always been some headroom in bespoke hardware that we make for certain applications. That is going to be different. It may be better, it may be worse, we don't know. Same thing, software, you're going to deploy software in a virtualized environment more often than you do in a bespoke hardware. Of how often do people upgrade their camera software, or pick your favorite switcher software, whatever that's going to be. However, in AMP, for example, probably updates software more often. So these are things you need to think about, both economically and technically.
Sure.
So, we've made some decisions of we will not deploy a .0 software version in some applications for that. And those are just decisions you have to make.
Yeah.
So I think it's more complex, which also adds, FinOps, commercial finance, pick your favorite people to help you do that, because I don't think any of us want to sit here and have to work out those economics to a point where you can say to the CFO, this is what it is.
I spend my whole day doing that.
And you love it, don't you?
And I think there are lots of different models, and the token model is mentioned. And people want to be able to pay, well, I don't want to pay for it when I'm not using it. I get that, right? That makes perfect sense. So as vendors, we have to come up with a model that gives you that, which, to Mike's point, means that we actually make a profit. So we can look at our costs, and I can see to the 0.1 penny what those costs are, and then we can actually, particularly in on-prem deployments, remember it's the same software, it's deployed exactly the same way, it just happens to be on a Dell server on-prem somewhere. We can and have looked at models that are time-based, right? So it's a fixed-term license, and for that you get an amount of functionality that we've worked out ahead of time is what you're going to use. And if you make commitments to that, that's great for us. We can plan, and if you buy that in a certain way, you can actually amortize that as if it was capital. So it does help those companies that still need to capitalize their purchases.
James.
One of the biggest places we find the fall off is AWS is always going to come to you asking for money at the end of the month when you use AWS services. And when you have on-prem services, you mitigate that AWS cost. So there really is an intersection point where it goes from being cheaper to have public cloud environments to a point where it goes to being cheaper to have on-prem environments. And I can't tell you exactly where in your operational workflow that transaction point is going to be. It's going to be some number greater than 50. It's probably going to be some number greater than 100, but I can almost guarantee to you that at your 300th show, it's going to be cheaper to do it on-prem.
That's an excellent point. If I get any advice, it's like know your crossover point.
Yeah.
Because there is one, and then you can figure out, oh, this is going to be shorter. Okay, in the cloud. It's going to be longer. Okay, I'm going to be on-prem.
I think the other part is that for the licensing models, it's hard because, we're a pain in the butt. We actually don't want a licensing model. We want multiple licensing models because there's going to be certain things that are going to be perpetual. Some's going to burst. Some of it you're going to want floating licenses because you've got, say, a super slow-mo function that you don't need in the same environment, but you want to be able to move it around because you're going to use it 300 days a year. So that's, I think, the hard part for you guys of meeting all of those so you stay healthy and in business, but it's economical for us. So it's multiple models that we've got to figure out that we didn't have to do before.
But as an example, slow-mo licenses was something that technology companies and users worked on together and figured out, essentially a common ground, a nice model to think that we could get there. Mark.
I think, Scott, you're right on the money on a lot of that or fundamentally, it is the responsibility of the vendor to work with our clients to fit the model that works for that client. And each one of the clients that we work with is in a different state of their business. Some of them are in an acquisition state. Some of them are just make money on event state. Others are trying to split up companies. Some of them are, depending on what it is, that those economic models and the licensing models that are work best for their business needs to be adaptable. It needs to, hey, I need to amateurize this. Hey, I need to CapEx that. I need to operationalize and do an OpEx side on this side. It is our responsibility as vendors to make that work and to make that as simple and as digestible for you as possible. And if we're not doing that, we're failing as a vendor.
I think it's also important to note that, vendors, not you guys, but vendors in general, going out of business doesn't help anyone, right? It is in the user's best interest for technology manufacturers to succeed so that you can reinvest in your product, you can develop R&D, so on and so forth. So there's kind of common ground, here that at some point, people can kind of get there.
The classic question is, as a product manager, you go to a customer with a new thing and you say, well, what do you think this should be? The answer? 0.
Right.
So we have to figure out something that's mutually beneficial, right?
I think one of the hard parts, though, for us is also training our people to be able to use all of the equipment. So that's where, when there are 100 vendors making the same product, we can't survive if we had to actually buy all 100. We're going to make some decisions to prefer a couple of those. It's not going to be one. It's going to be a few. But I think that is the challenge of keeping everybody healthy as the industry, continues to grow.
And just to expand on your point there, we're not in the business of buying hardware and then telling our clients to use it. we're in the business of a client comes to us and says, we want this solution, and we pick that hardware out for them and give them a nice packaged solution. So a huge part of that is the crew that exists on the mobile facilities, the crew that exists in the stations, and having cloud-based solutions that meet those people where they are today. It's the same reason that we don't see touchscreens for every audio console in the world, right? Because an A1 still wants to push faders. They're not going to be happy if you just sit there and say, here's a 36-inch wide touchscreen, right? So as we see more of those things develop, we're able to move in that direction. And as those things continue to develop, I think it's going to cause exactly what everyone here is saying of what does this cost really need to be, and how do I need to price it out, and how do we manage to secure in an affordable way the client who's showing up and saying, I need to do 10 of this show. How can I buy a license from you to do this for 10 shows? Or you're talking to one of the truck providers like us, and we're saying, no, I really want a perm license, right? I want to be able to use this particular instance for the next 10 years in the cloud because I'm building it in on that date length of amortization schedule. I don't think any individual on this stage has the answer to the question of what's the right way to price this thing. Yep. I think all we can do is sit here and ask our vendor friends on the stage to say, work with me when the time is there for you to work with me. I might need burst licensing. I really want perm codes, but for my example, right, for 315 days a year, I need 6 licenses. And for 45 days a year, I need 10. So I need to be on both sides of that anyways. So having a really good relationship with your vendors and having openness on the vendor side to come back and be willing to work with you on those things, I think is going to be invaluable to making this work for everybody and letting us all make that money.
And that's where the potential of pooled licenses and these types of models comes in, right?
So if you look at tokens, the good thing about an imperfect model is that you can buy 100,000 tokens and you can use them for whatever you want. So if you think of AMP, it's an operating system. There are 300 native apps that sit on that operating system. There are 100 partner apps that sit on that operating system. So you could, a token gets you access to any of those. And if today I'm using 10 ingest channels and a switcher with 3 MEs and a multi-viewer and this, and the next day I actually need 4 ingest and I need a bigger, and you can just use your tokens across that. It's very flexible from that perspective in an imperfect world.
Yeah, I think my request, is be creative, be open to being creative. I think one of the things that, and also understand our business models in the sense of, we end up with contracts for multi-year. So when, we get some of the agreements that say the vendor can unilaterally change how many tokens it is for a given function at any course during the agreement, that's a challenge for us. Because if suddenly you need twice as many tokens for the same function during a contract that we've got a 3-year contract for, that's a challenge. So I think it's just that mutual understanding that we probably all didn't need in the hardware world because it wasn't as interactive as it is now.
Sure. Remember when we used to pay by text message, everybody? Remember that? It's funny how these models just change, right? They're just like, no, we're not going to do that anymore. So I want to go to more on the collaboration as it comes to the technology rather than collaboration when it comes to pricing. James, I know it's something that you're passionate about. So in a perfect world, how could manufacturers, vendors, and broadcasters help each other to streamline this transition to virtualization? You know what I mean? To efficiently use hardware and software licenses. Like, how would you like to see the community work together? What would you like to see?
Well, the good news is we're already seeing some of it. We're seeing even conversations here today about new open standards that are going to allow everybody to provide transport in consistent methods, right? There's not a great appetite in the cloud to be using a solution like 2110 because of bandwidth limitations, right? But as you start looking at various formats, you start talking about NDI and being able to use that as a SDK. There was another SDK discussed earlier today that will allow more vendors to come on board in a consistent manner. Having consistent inter-platform handoff there is super critical. For me, it's kind of nice working in an NDI environment on occasion because it's very standard and I don't need to worry about interplay between devices. But it's also important that I'm able to migrate those licenses around and use them as I need to, right? I had a terrifying conversation with a vendor who said, I want you to only use this license for this client. And that breaks my model, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to have some of those back and forth conversations and ensure that we're working with our vendors, we're working with our partners, and we're doing this in a way that allows Game Creek Video's salespeople to go out and sell the product on behalf of the vendor and know that we're going to have an interoperative relationship there to support both of our companies.
Mark, you talked about how it is up to you guys. If you're not fulfilling your end of the bargain, you're failing the client, and that's on you, right? Can you kind of expand on that and how you think everybody can kind of collaborate to make this transition a little bit more seamless?
Well, I mean, let's draw a line between the commercial side and the technology side. From the technology side, which is where I think your question was coming from,
Yes,
is making that that interactivity as simple as you can. Opal RESTful APIs, standards, being able to spin up and spin down systems simply, good documentation, easy to use systems, so you're not spending time, wasting time training and educating and all of those things, because all of that comes down to where in the end, the most important currency that is almost like the dollar is the time it takes to go and actually do all of this. If it takes me an hour to explain our licensing model or to tell you, hey, this is how this system talks to that system, where we could have spent time to actually do that in a more efficient way, we just start reaping the benefits down the way. And that starts giving you the ability to give you quality of service at scale, because then you have the ability to duplicate this easier and faster and simpler across the whole workflow in a way that is flexible for whatever the end client needs.
sure. Mike?
Yeah, I'll just tag on to the open standards. Things like MXL that are coming out are really important for multi-vendor. I also think things like observability and metrics and how we report these, because it's not like you have a patch panel and you can put a waveform monitor on there. You need to know what's going on, and so that's very important. I think also if you take a TVU or a Grass Valley that both have an ecosystems and we kind of do everything, you can deployment's super easy, fast, that kind of thing. But I think we need to get to a multi-vendor environment where deployment is as easy as that. And so there, one customer who shall remain nameless said, I can press the button and my EC2 spins up in 2 minutes. Awesome. But then I'm faxing signals and figuring out SRTs and IP ports and doing config files and certain software. A half a day later, I'm ready to go.
Right.
That's worse than an SDI facility on-prem, where it's like source, destination, take, fire, salvo, boom, you're there. And so we have to solve those types of things as well.
And I think also on the technical side, it's building your application that you're processing, that something else could deploy it, something else could orchestrate it, something else could control it.
Yes.
Because as much as AMP wants to be in charge of the world, AMP is not going to be in charge of every workflow, and it's built as such. So I think that's just an important thing, that there is going to be something orchestrating you.
Yeah. Docker containers, things that are standard.
Docker, Kube, yeah.
Let me take my developers, tie into your RESTful APIs, and command and control your systems, right? If you've got an orchestration layer, great. If you are able to go out and spend the money on some of the larger orchestration companies, you can get a lot of capability there. But there's a lot of cost on that front. Make your API readable and usable and approachable so that we can configure that to stand up quickly.
And that, from a TVU perspective, that's exactly what we're doing right now. We built FranceD like in a couple of months, super fast, all that great. But who could do that? It's like the engineers that know it in their heads. So we're in the process of documenting our all APIs, getting SDKs out there. The goal being that somebody like Game Creek can come in and in an hour code something up and you're there. That's where we need to get to.
People are doing that on AMP today, and we have customers that are doing stuff that we didn't know it could do, right?
Yeah. I think also be open that we're going to want different relationships. So we're pushing hard on developer-to-developer relationships. We have a Slack channel with your development team. And we don't want to go through a salesperson to a product manager to a
Horrible.
CT. It's terrible. No, it's terrible for everybody involved.
No offense,
but
Alex.
I think that's, again, different. So I think be open to that and maybe set up your organization so that isn't offensive, but it's collaborative and there's a way to do that, and that becomes normal. Because I think that's going to make us all more efficient.
All great points. Any questions out there before we get to our closing lightning round question? Excellent. Make sure to grab them off stage. So, folks, again, what's the lesson learned? I just love this question because it is a tangible, hey, I walked away and I'm better for it question. Mike, you can use your France TV example or any other example. What's one major lesson you learned from a virtualized deployment that maybe can help other people here avoid a few headaches?
Well, I think it gets back to that observability point that I just made. Doing this, making sure you see what's going on in signals so you can react fast, because servers still do go down in AWS or wherever, and so you need to know the sources, and so you need to know where things are at all times, and I think doing that really well is key.
If you're troubleshooting the entire time, like you said, for half a day, what's the point, right?
Yeah. It's coming back to quality of service at scale and being able to do it efficiently and simply across every piece of video that is going across your whole platform. At least that's the approach from a tag perspective. If you need the visibility for it, trust the technology to be able to get that data into it and feed that where you're at. So we're in a situation where we had 3 different phases in IP. So we're in IP 3.0 right now. So IP 1.0 said, hey, that looks really cool, let's try it. IP 2.0, hey, we're doing pretty good, we're working, it's working most of the time. And we're on the precipice of IP 3.0 is that we have to start getting really good at it and doing it in a way where it's lean and it makes sense. And that's where I think we're at.
Alex?
So I think the lesson that we've learned, and particularly with playout, funnily enough, because it is very complex, is you can't have a deployment without complete coordination with customers in the way that you've described, having access to our engineering staff, having access to somebody who can help you with that. We've had a couple of experiences where people have done stuff that we didn't know they'd done, and it hasn't worked out so well. So that's it.
Transparency, for sure. James?
Listen to your operators. Be in touch with the people actually using the solution that you're building and make sure that you're building a solution that they want to use. If you hand over something at the end of the day that they walk into and say, this is better, you're going to have better shows because of it. If you walk in and just hand them a solution and say, go use this today, it's a fight the entire way up the hill.
Mm-hmm. Take us out, Scott.
I think it's a dimmer, not a light switch. Don't feel the need to do everything at once. Starting small and being successful, working your way through it. And then the other thing is, too, if it hurts, do it again. Just not on air.
Sure. A masochist, pure and through, right here. Thanks so much, guys. Really, really big hand for our panelists. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.